The Lost Lincoln Photograph. In American history, few moments are as pivotal and tragic as the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. And for 150 years, the final hours of Lincoln's life have been shrouded in mystery, with only those present at his deathbed privy to the details of his appearance in those last moments. But what if a long-lost photograph could shed new light on this dark chapter of America's past? This is the tantalizing question posed by The Lost Lincoln, a documentary that aired on the Discovery Channel in 2020. The documentary centers around the work of Whitney Braun, a California-based investigator who claims to have uncovered a previously unknown photograph of the dying president. The image is haunting. A man bearing a striking resemblance to Lincoln lies in bed, his eyes open in a vacant death stare. One eye appears to bulge from its socket, a detail that Braun, after consulting with a ballistics expert, believes to be evidence of the fatal bullet wound. The man in the photograph also seems to share scars with the late president, further bolstering Braun's claim. The story behind the photograph is as intriguing as the image itself. It was allegedly taken by Henry Ulke, a photographer known for capturing deathbed scenes. Ulke happened to be staying at the Peterson house, where the mortally wounded president was carried the night of the assassination. The photo was reportedly given to a relative of Lincoln's biological mother before making its way to Braun via an Illinois dentist. However, not everyone is convinced by Braun's findings. In interviews, Harold Holzer, a scholar who has extensively researched Lincoln's 130 known and verified photographs, points out several discrepancies that suggest the image may be fake. The man in the photograph sports a full beard, whereas Lincoln wore a much shorter beard in the last photo before his death. The body is clothed in a shirt, despite Holzer's assertion that Lincoln was stripped to check for additional wounds. And perhaps most damningly, the photograph is an ambrotype, a format that had largely fallen out of use by the mid-1860s. The only confirmed post-assassination image of Lincoln remains the one taken surreptitiously as his body lay in state in the Capitol, just before the crowds of mourners were admitted to pay their final respects. The secret FBI Civil War dig. A strange scene unfolded on a crisp March day in 2018 in the rolling hills of southern Pennsylvania. Dennis Paratus and Warren Gettler, two local treasure hunters, found themselves following FBI agent Jake Archer up a hillside, their hearts racing with anticipation. Gettler, a former Wall Street Journal reporter, and Paratus had spent decades searching for a legendary cache of Civil War gold, and now they believed they were on the cusp of the greatest discovery of their lives. But as they crested the hill, their excitement quickly turned to disbelief. Before them lay an empty hole, surrounded by a swarm of FBI vehicles, agents, and dig teams. At that moment, a chilling question began to form in their minds. Had the FBI just orchestrated one of the largest gold heists in American history, right under their noses? The story of the missing gold stretches back to the chaotic days of the Civil War. Specific details vary, but in one popular account, a small group of Union soldiers set out on a covert mission to transport a secret shipment of 26 gold ingots, each weighing 50 pounds, from San Francisco to the Philadelphia Mint. The 1,300-pound treasure was meant to fund the Union war effort. Seeking to avoid the enemy, they charted a course through the rugged Appalachian Mountains, but their journey quickly unraveled. Plagued by environmental hazards, equipment failures, infighting, and disease, the group became hopelessly lost in the wilderness. 3 men were sent out as scouts in a desperate attempt to find help. When the sole survivor of the trio finally returned with a rescue party, they were greeted by a grim scene: broken wagons, scattered belongings, and no sign of the men or the gold. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, tasked with investigating the disappearance, recovered 2.5 ingots of gold and some human remains in 1865, but the bulk of the treasure remained elusive. The true extent of the lost gold has never been determined. But in 2018, Paratus and his father, who'd been scouring the area for decades, believed they had finally hit pay dirt. Their metal detectors had picked up readings that strongly suggested a significant amount of metal lay hidden beneath the earth. Encouraged by Gettler, Paratus contacted the FBI, hoping to secure digging rights in the area. Despite a seemingly tepid initial response from Agent Jake Archer, the FBI soon informed Paratus and Gettler that they had obtained a search warrant from the Pennsylvania courts to commence a digging operation. The early signs were promising. Density scans indicated that a massive quantity of gold, or a gold-like substance, was buried deep within the hillside. Geological surveys suggested that as much as 9 tons of metal lay waiting to be unearthed. As dozens of vehicles descended upon the site and a sprawling dig site took shape, Paratus and Gettler could barely contain their excitement. But then, nothing. The dig seemingly yielded only an empty hole, leaving Paratus and Gettler stunned and confused. They claimed the FBI advised them to keep quiet about the disappointing outcome, ostensibly to protect the agency's credibility after investing heavily in the dig. Still, Paratus and Gettler were convinced that something more sinister had happened. They believed that the FBI had actually found the gold and orchestrated an elaborate ruse to keep the treasure for themselves. They maintained that the empty hole was merely a smokescreen, a ploy to conceal the truth of the FBI's monumental discovery and deny the treasure hunters the substantial finder's fee they would have been owed. At first glance, their allegations might seem like the stuff of conspiracy theories. However, the FBI's steadfast refusal to comment on any aspect of the dig, despite official records confirming that federal agents sought permission from the Pennsylvania courts to excavate state-owned land, has only fueled speculation. Moreover, for the FBI to secure an affidavit like the one they presented, they would have needed to provide substantial evidence to justify a reasonable expectation of success. Evidence like the scans that indicated a massive trove of gold lurking beneath the surface. Then there's the question of money. Conservative estimates place the value of the lost gold at $100 million, which would have entitled Paratus to a reward of at least $10 million. But if the geological surveys were accurate, and the metal deposit was 5 to 7 times larger than initially believed, Paratus' potential payday could have soared to over $50 million, a staggering sum even for the federal government. As long as the FBI maintains its silence, suspicions will continue to swirl around their involvement in the search for the missing Civil War gold. While it's entirely plausible that the dig came up empty, the circumstantial evidence is hard to ignore. Paratus and Gettler remain adamant that the FBI secretly spirited away one of the most significant gold finds in history, using the two men and their reputations as convenient fall guys. In the end, the truth may never be known. The true fate of John Wilkes Booth. On the evening of April 14, 1865, a single gunshot pierced the air of Ford's Theater, forever altering the course of American history. John Wilkes Booth, the man who had just fatally wounded President Abraham Lincoln, leapt from the box seats onto the stage, uttering the phrase that would be forever etched in infamy, Sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. As chaos erupted in the theater, Booth seized the opportunity to flee, mounting a waiting horse and vanishing into the night with a cache of supplies and an extra gun. 12 days later, the official narrative tells us that the assassin met his end, cornered in a burning barn and felled by a bullet to the neck from the gun of Sergeant Boston Corbett. But even as Booth drew his last breaths, whispers of doubt began to circulate. Did the most notorious man in America truly perish that day, or did he somehow manage to evade his pursuers and live out his days in anonymity? The theories that Booth cheated death have long centered around 3 enigmatic figures: John B. Wilkes, John St. Helen, and David E. George. Of these, the tale of John B. Wilkes, an Englishman residing in India in the late 1800s, is perhaps the most easily dismissed. While some claim a resemblance between Wilkes and Booth, the notion that the assassin would simply adopt a barely altered alias and relocate to a distant corner of the British Empire without any attempt at disguise stretches credulity. Far more intriguing are the stories of John St. Helen and David E. George, 2 men who bore a striking resemblance to an aged Booth, and who, on their deathbeds, both claimed to be the infamous assassin. St. Helen, who died of illness in 1877, confided in his friend John Bates that not only was he the man who killed Lincoln, but that the plot had been orchestrated by none other than Vice President Andrew Johnson, a Southern Democrat whose views stood in stark contrast to those of his slain predecessor. St. Helen claimed that Johnson had provided him with a code phrase that facilitated his escape from Washington, and that in the intervening years, he had come to deeply regret his role in Lincoln's death. David E. George, meanwhile, took his own life in 1903, consuming a lethal dose of arsenic. In his final note, he too claimed to be John Wilkes Booth. The toxic substance preserved his remains in a manner that allowed for several photographs to be taken of his face, images that even skeptics of the survival theory admit bear a remarkable likeness to the assassin. Could either of these men have been Booth? Some researchers, like author and investigator Nate Orlowek, who has devoted much of his life to unraveling the mystery, are convinced that David E. George was indeed the genuine article. Others propose an even more tantalizing scenario, that St. Helen and George were one and the same, with the former faking his death and assuming a new identity when he feared his secret had been uncovered. The key to unlocking the truth, some believe, lies in a macabre relic, a fragment of spinal cord purportedly taken from the man killed by Sergeant Corbett, which now resides in the National Museum of Health and Medicine. Proponents of the escape theory have long sought to have this grisly specimen subjected to genetic testing, using DNA from the remains of Booth's brother, Edwin, as a basis for comparison. Yet, time and again, the courts have rebuffed these efforts, leaving the tantalizing possibility of a definitive answer just out of reach. Until such testing can be conducted, the question of Booth's fate will remain shrouded in uncertainty. The Hunleys' fateful mission. On a moonlit night in February 1864, the waters surrounding Charleston, South Carolina, were teeming with Union ships. For years, the United States Navy had maintained a stranglehold in the Confederate port city, slowly suffocating the rebel cause as supplies dwindled and hope faded. But on this particular evening, a sudden explosion shattered the tense calm, engulfing the blockading warship USS Housatonic in a maelstrom of fire and smoke. The source of the devastating blast was the H.L. Hunley, a Confederate submarine that had successfully delivered a torpedo charge into the hull of the Union ship. In a matter of minutes, the Housatonic slipped beneath the waves, carrying 5 of her crew to a watery grave. The Hunley had achieved its objective, striking a blow against the Union blockade, but at a terrible cost. The submarine and its crew vanished, never to be seen alive again, their fate an enduring mystery that has captivated historians and naval enthusiasts for generations. When the submarine's carcass was finally discovered in 1995 and raised from its murky tomb 5 years later, the remains of its crew were found still at their stations, a chilling clue as to the suddenness of their demise. The absence of any signs of attempted escape seemed to rule out mechanical failure, leaving researchers to ponder the true cause of the Hunleys' sinking. One of the most compelling theories suggests that the Hunleys' own torpedo may have been its undoing. Unlike modern torpedoes, the Hunleys' weapon was a timed charge affixed to a long pole protruding from the submarine's bow. To deliver its payload, the Hunley had to approach perilously close to its target, a fact underscored by accounts of Housatonic's crew firing small arms at the approaching vessel. In 2013, a meticulous inspection of the Hunleys' torpedo pole revealed that the charge was not designed to be removable, but rather was secured with copper brackets. This discovery led researcher Rachel Lance to a startling conclusion. If the Hunley had been within a mere 20 to 30 feet of the explosion, the resulting shockwave would have been catastrophic for its crew. Lance conducted a series of experiments to test her hypothesis, using a 1/6 scale model of the Hunley, an explosive charge, and Navy pressure gauges. The results showed that the crew of the Hunley had a staggering 95% chance of suffering immediate fatal injuries from the shockwave generated by their own torpedo. In this scenario, the lifeless bodies of the crew would have drifted with the crippled submarine as it slowly filled with water and settled on the sea floor. While the torpedo theory offers a compelling explanation for the Hunleys' demise, other possibilities have been put forth over the years. Some researchers speculate that the submarine may have fallen victim to the tide, with the crew intentionally resting on the sea floor to wait for an incoming tide and miscalculating their oxygen supply, leading to asphyxiation. Others suggest that the Hunley could have been struck by one of the ships rushing to rescue the Housatonic's crew, or swamped by the waves generated by their rapid approach. A final theory posits that small arms fire from the Housatonic may have cracked the Hunley's glass viewports, killing Lieutenant George E. Dixon and leaving his crew trapped and doomed in a flooding vessel. Though each theory is possible, the torpedo theory seems to offer the most comprehensive and compelling explanation. If the submarine's own weapon was indeed the catalyst for its demise, the men who manned the vessel unwittingly embarked on a one-way mission. While the submarine's successful attack on the Housatonic served as a proof of concept for underwater warfare, its impact on the Civil War was negligible. The loss of a single Union ship did little to alter the course of the conflict, or loosen the Union's stranglehold on Charleston. Knights of the Golden Circle. In the turbulent years leading up to the American Civil War, a shadowy organization known as the Knights of the Golden Circle emerged from the depths of the antebellum South. Founded by George W. L. Bickley in 1854, this clandestine group harbored a grandiose vision, the creation of a vast slave-holding empire that would dominate the Western Hemisphere. Bickley, a fervent believer in the institution of slavery, conceived of the Golden Circle as a means to secure the future of slave-holding states and the economic status of slave owners. With its capital in Havana, Cuba, this hypothetical empire would encompass the southern United States, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and parts of South America. The men who rallied to Bickley's cause, dubbed Knights, were united in their determination to realize this vision. As the United States edged closer to the precipice of war, the Knights of the Golden Circle shifted their focus. No longer content with building a new nation from scratch, they began to advocate for the secession of the southern states, which would then serve as the foundation for their expansionist ambitions. The birth of the Confederacy in 1861 seemed to signal the beginning of their long-awaited quest, and Knights infiltrated the North, engaging in covert operations to support the Southern war effort. But even as the Confederacy lay in ruins, following its surrender in 1865, the Knights refused to abandon their cause. Rumors began to circulate that the organization scattered its existing wealth in gold across the globe, while simultaneously plotting audacious heists of federal reserves to finance the resurrection of the defeated South. In 1901, 6 bags of double eagle gold coins, worth $30,000 at the time and valued in the millions today, vanished from the San Francisco Mint without a trace. Although the head clerk was eventually convicted of the crime and served time in prison, the coins were never recovered. Many believe that the Knights of the Golden Circle, with their extensive network and resources, were behind the heist, having targeted the coins to fund their clandestine activities. The Knights' influence allegedly extended to some of the most notorious figures of the American frontier, including the legendary outlaw Jesse James. Some historians suspect that James, rumored to be a member of the Knights, funneled a significant portion of his ill-gotten gains to them. The Merrimack Caves in southern Missouri, known to have served as a hideout for James on several occasions, are also steeped in local lore, claiming that the outlaw stashed a vast treasure within their depths. If these tales are to be believed, it is possible that the caves served not only as a sanctuary for James, but also as a secret base of operations for the Knights of the Golden Circle. The true extent of the Knights' power and influence may never be fully understood, a consequence of the organization's highly secretive nature. While their involvement in the San Francisco Mint heist and their ties to Jesse James remain speculative, the allure of these theories persists, fueled by the possibility that the Knights of the Golden Circle wielded far more power than history has acknowledged. Which of these Civil War mysteries do you find most compelling? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching Dark 5. Like and subscribe to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of this world and beyond.